Hallo miteinander, I'm Gish86 and this is Touhou Koukishin. Before we go into the episode proper, here's a short gambling montage. You don't want to enter the 11th sub-level until you've spent a lot of money on the gachapon and sufficiently optimized your gear. We did this for roughly 5 minutes, and our starting equipment, as described in the forums, is an example for being good enough. Again, you absolutely don't want to be poorly prepared for this, as what is coming up will be the harshest challenge Touhou Koukishin has ever thrown at us. And you want to know when it goes from manageable to brutal. Well, from the very first room, as it holds a golden knight. The regular steel-clad headless knights were already true juggernauts, outclassing all other enemies before them, so Ankakespa thought, let's make a palette swap of them that does more damage, has more hit points, and also uses attacks that are even more difficult to avoid. If that wasn't hateful enough, the next room will show us something equally relentless. This one has a strange purple aura in it, emerging from a gem in the center. What this aura does isn't so apparent. Watch our playstyle here. Notice something odd, something fundamental that we are not doing. I call this trap the gravity gem, as it turns our acrobatic leaps into feeble, pitiful hops. That can become a problem. Now that these two new dangers have been introduced, the labyrinth will slightly calm down again, at least for a little while. We haven't even had time for our customary recap yet, so without further ado, last time we defeated Patchouli Knowledge, an opponent we didn't exactly expect to find here, mostly due to how docile she had been as an NPC before. She was so formidable even, you have to wonder why she isn't a playable character of this game. She has more than enough reason and skill to take on a more active role in our quest. Now, I know what a lot of you will say to this. Asthma, anemia and all that. I know my Touhou jokes, but here I'm not buying them. In this iteration of her, Patchouli was badass. The best explanation I have is that she is a lazy bum. So, I've decided to nickname her the Great Unmoving Sits on Her Ass from now on. But enough about her. We just found a Kamui Makiri. It is a strong, reliable weapon, but the chances that we'll ever use one are only slim. The 11th sub-level does introduce new items, but they are rarely much better than what we were able to get earlier already, if they're even better at all. It'll take a little while longer until we will feel the next noticeable jump in item quality. That is why I recommended to gamble so much before this point. It is a little unfair. As you can see, the monster level has again been increased by 5 to 55. Unlike the last increase, we're not really getting a very cool drop table in return. Because of this, the 11th sub-level can feel a little bit like a difficulty spike. We just received a Neptune Malachite from the Red Flower Fairy. That could be interesting, but we already got one from the gachapon. It's an all-around improvement to the Heliodor Venus if you're wondering, yet it proves one thing, it's like I said. The new drop table just won't surprise you too often. Maybe sometimes, which is why we're still holding on to the pilfering knife. There will come a point in time where doing that will be very suicidal, but for now, we are still good with it and the luck that it brings. Just so you know, starting from this sub-level, we'll be exploring the areas a little bit more thoroughly than we have in the past. Not super meticulously or anything, but we'll be going down one or the other unimportant seeming corridor. Who knows, they might have an item for us, or maybe a simple enemy for some extra experience. Headless Knights can never be outside of chambers, so we needn't worry. Or maybe we'll just find some health vases. If we're running dry, those can be real lifesavers. Yeah, it's definitely a smart idea to look around instead of rushing through floors now. We are so much less likely to die that way. We can always do without that. After all, dying costs money. I said that early on in the Let's Play, but I forgot to mention one thing then. When you die, you also hear coins jangling on the floor, to rub it in that you lost some of your wealth. But speaking of that, when we lost to Satori that one time, we did not hear such a sound. I'm going to explain why in a minute. First, let us plunder the Western Chamber. Lots of goodies in that one, and they aren't even guarded. Usually, we have to fight hard for these, so I am very grateful for such a freebie. So, about the loss of money on a death, it's just like I told you, 10%, but only during a stage, never against bosses. Except that you will have to try again until you actually win, there is no penalty for dying on a boss, for good reason. We know Touhou Koukishin is not a game that tries to be notorious in its difficulty. Its bosses, however, are often designed not to be beaten in a new player's first try. Everyone dies once or twice against Moko, for example. She is just like that. Those attempts are meant to be a learning process. It would feel very arbitrary to be punished for learning a boss. Stages are different though. You mostly die in stages for carelessness. Being careless is something that is alright to be punished for in my book. Okay, we're at the 12th sublevel and it starts with a slow-moving mace machine. Not really that threatening, is it? Imagine if they were faster, like really fast. That could be dangerous. On the subject of traps, I don't think B12 has any gravity gems, but it does have some golden knights. I don't think there is a sublevel from now on that doesn't have at least one golden knight somewhere. And one of them is right down here in the most southwestern chamber. You know, I really wish I could give you a substantial and stylish strategy against them to just take some of their terror away, but I don't think such a thing exists. Going into close combat with them will always result in an ugly trading of blows, which can never really be in your favor. I can only say the usual, most self-explanatory things. If you have a spell card, use it. And if not, your best bets will be ranged attacks. A little cheap and cowardly, but safe. Oh, what is this now? About those faster maces. I'm not sure if it really gets across how fast these are, but if you're standing in front of them yourselves, you're going to be a little bit frightened. Wouldn't be so bad if this was an exception, but guess what? That is going to be the norm from now on. They hurt really bad too if they get you, so you're going to have to learn the rhythm of jumping over them and burn it into your mind. Was it worth the risk in this case? I would say it was, easily, for we got a golden goddess statue. This is another item that you can't do anything with but sell, so now I have a confession to make. I declare the mystery material the best of these, and that is not true. The golden goddess statue goes for 2.5 times their worth, making for a total of 100,000 coins. Obviously, I deliberately lied about this just to hurt your feelings. Nah, I either forgot or never even saw one before my recent test runs of this area. The game doesn't hand them out easily. Now here are two events of great importance in very quick succession. finding a Jupiter agate, and learning the Blood Moon skill. There's not a whole lot to say on Blood Moon, except that it's amazing and very similar to our good old time paradox. It goes for the same cost, but is even stronger and covers additional ground. It is truly an excellent skill, and we're going to use it now instead of Dryad effect. Now here are two Headless Knights which normally would be bad enough. To add artificial difficulty, a weird, unexplainable recording hiccup came along. That honestly scared me, and you can see in my play how much that shook me. Technical difficulties are something that will make every LPer lose their cool. Luckily, it seemed to be an exception and didn't break anything in the long run. Back on track, we heard the basics about Blood Moon. Let's not forget about the Jupiter agate we found. That one can be extremely helpful if you never got lucky enough to find a pilfering knife until now. It is an accessory that raises item drop rate by about 200% or so, and it has the usual addition of other helpful stats, except critical chance. Critical chance will be dropped by 100%. This will effectively lock it at 0, nothing. Unless you were able to get a weapon and an armor with a combined critical chance of over 100%. Yeah, I don't think something like that exists in this game. If you're using that Jupiter agate, you're going to have to accept that you'll only be seeing white numbers instead of the occasional yellows. Whether being unable to crit is worse than losing maximum health from your pilfering knife, it is hard to say. You know, we could have combined the Kamui Makiri with the Jupiter agate and seen how that would have worked out, but I just didn't think of it at the time. It's something one can try. I think we've been everywhere of potential importance on this sub-level now, except the very central chamber. These can be interesting, although they often aren't, I've noticed. Video games tend to not reward you for the most obvious path. Might as well give it a shot. Hey, I said we should be more thorough, so let us follow up on that promise. Because we are in less of a rush now than we have been in the previous batch of videos, we also won't be advancing in floors as fast anymore. This time, we'll only be exploring 2 sub-levels fully, and part of, maybe about half of the 3rd. Just saying this now as a warning, for we'll be stopping very abruptly again today. It's time to walk to the exit now. Or bunny hop, I suppose. I swear I'm not making any fun of any raisins or Tays, or Serans or Ringos. Dang, there are so many rabbit people in the Touhou-verse nowadays. Well, they say rabbits multiply. It's always annoying if you find the way blocked from one side. We should get used to that though. Levels will get more and more complicated from now on. With some exceptions. B13 awaits, and it means business. It starts us off with another gravity gem. Not being able to jump can be a real crutch. After all, jumping is Sakuya's primary form of evasion. There are ways to compensate, however. Some of our skills can be used to gain extra mobility in an emergency. Blood Moon, for example, is like a short, sudden dash. I think expending skill diamonds just to keep you safe is well worth it, even if you don't hit anything with the skill itself. If doing so makes you run low on skill diamonds, you can just retreat away from the influence of the gravity gem, so long as you are quick enough. There's no shame in that if you ask me, no shame in being crafty. This room here doesn't have anything dangerous in particular in it, but somehow it might have been small mistakes leading to more small mistakes. It left us in a bad shape. That brings us to what is possibly the most important tip I can give you for our current set of labyrinth floors. See how we are backtracking right now, wasting time. That may seem totally pointless at first, but every sublevel starting from B11 has a vase with a full heal in its entrance chamber. Always remember that and always leave it for when you need it the most. As cruel as the labyrinth has gotten, it's reassuring to know that you always have a one-time safety net at those spots. Just make sure not to fight so long that you don't make it back there. Well, what is this here? A Uranus Larimar. I think that is an accessory, a decent yet not exactly incredibly stunning one. Just like the joke that I could make about its name, we don't really need it. There are few, very few jokes that I consider beneath me, but that would be one of them. Even though by just hinting at it, I kind of made it anyway. I just can't win. Another room with a gravity gem. Sheesh, the 13th sublevel seems to be in love with these. I don't like them. I doubt you will, and Sakuya certainly doesn't either. Sakuya, our perfect maid, has really proven herself heroic with how far she made it, didn't she? As you know, I really like her as a character. She ranks fairly high in the popularity polls too. But just a short while ago, I found out she isn't without her anti-fan base. Yeah, there is some controversy to her. Said controversy would be that some argue she is too stereotypical and catering strongly to the French maid fetish. That is somewhat valid, I guess. But honestly, just from my side, I never saw her in that light. I think there's a lot to her. She's very loyal and hardworking, and I think it's funny how eccentric and persistent she is in Touhou 6. She can also be cold and dangerous in some of the other games. In the end, I just think warrior servants are cool, and it's no surprise they're in a lot of media. There is a ninja maid, for example, in Code Geass, and there's also the butler in Hellsing. A maid can be seen as the rough equivalent of a butler. Do I have any examples that aren't all anime? Yes, I've recently read a novel called The Well of Ascension, and that one also had servants that later turned out to be assassins. Should you really think that fighting is something a servant shouldn't do, as it's just too cliché? Isn't Sakuya still cool for being able to stop time? That is a power that Ankake Spa and Touhou Koukishin did not take as much advantage of as they could have, but that is only a minor gripe. We had to retreat from the previous gravity gem chamber just to stay alive, but now we are back, fresh and ready to kick the butt of today's last headless knight. That is, if he even has a corporeal butt. If not, that would also make him a buttless knight, a figure of horror that I would honestly find a lot scarier. And he is done. With that, I'm Geshady6, this was Touhou Koukishin, and next time, a fire hotter than any other in Gensokyo. Bis bald!